Last week was crazy. If you're like me, you were glued to CNN for a time, and then MSNBC, and you're kind of going back and forth between the different news channels, seeing what was going on with this Boston bombing and the gunfights and all this craziness unfolding. And it reminded me of a study I had read a couple years ago coming out of Princeton, where they took a sampling of people and they asked them, over the last year, we want you to come up with the 10 most memorable moments of what happened. And these people made their list, and then they brought the sampling back together. And what they found was that 7 out of 10 things that stuck out in their minds, that this is what made up my past year, were negative. They included miscarriages, they included deaths in family, they included national tragedies, they included a litany of these negative things, so much so that 7 out of 10 things that people remembered were actually negative. And I think what we found was that we have this natural proclivity to focus on suffering, to focus on negativity, to focus on the bad. Last week, certainly, I think if you were to ask any random sampling, like what went on in the world, we would be confronted with more and more negativity. We would be confronted with the Boston Marathon bombing, with the gunfights, with this chaos that is happening in the world. And we might begin to believe this lie that the world is negative and it's dark and it's full of hatred, and the list goes on and on. But I think what we have to remember is that in 6 to 7 billion people that make up the world, every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every year, 6 to 7 billion positive things are happening. And though our 24-hour news cycles may focus on the tragedy, and we may exploit the really negative and huge things where people are suffering, there are wonderful and joyous things that are inbreaking and happening in our cultures, in our communities, and in our lives every single minute of every single day. And so what we must do is return to this promise and this notion. 1 John 4 talks about that where there is love, God is there. That God, at his very essence of his being, is love. And that anything that resembles love is God. And so we have 6 to 7 billion chances to see God through love happening in the world. And we can't be caught off guard and blindsided and confused that the world is really just a couple stories of tragedy that happens here and there. So how must we, as the church, as a body of people moving forward, remind ourselves day after day, minute after minute, that wonderful and beautiful things are happening because God is the author of love? How are we going to do that? How are we going to tell that story? How are we going to tell our story and bring other people into this story that God is love, and love is happening all around, despite the little blips of darkness that happens in and around us?